Hey guys, Drifter here. As of today, 16 states have implemented age verification laws for accessing adult materials online. The laws were very strict and require state governments to verify your age, usually via driver's license, before you can log on to any of these sites. Most major adult entertainment providers saw this as a gross violation of privacy and were also intimidated by potential lawsuit from states' attorneys generals or large fines if minors steal their parents' IDs and get onto the website. So, unsurprisingly, a lot of the big websites decided to ban individual states from accessing their content. In my home state of Texas, this is what happens if you try to visit Pornhub. And you might say, okay, Pornhub is the biggest thing, but there's tons of other sites, right? Like, what about Chatterbait? How about Xhamster? Oh God, how are we doing on Red GIFs? They even got Spank Bang, of all places. I just woke up one day and found several of my favorite adult entertainment websites to be completely inaccessible in the state of Texas. This was extremely distressing to me, and it made me feel like I was living in the novel 1984. The state government was effectively controlling my private life by restricting what I do at home in my private time. I believe this to be a violation of my First Amendment rights, a violation of my right to privacy, and an attempted state intimidation of marginalized groups. We're going to be talking about all of those topics and more, but first, I'd like to introduce you all to my wife, JWO Designs.
Hello, hi, I'm JWO. I'll be back to talk to y'all about the effects of pornography on relationship dynamics, and also I'll have a little bit of history fun facts.
Today's video is going to be the Drifter standard of covering a topic factually and from both sides as much as possible. It just so happens that today's topic is very weird instead of doing gaming stuff. I really didn't want to sit here and get on my YouTube channel and talk about adult entertainment. As a matter of fact, it's profoundly embarrassing to me, but I also feel that it's wrong to not use my platform to speak out against what I believe to be an egregious violation of my First Amendment rights. And I believe that any good that comes of this, of expressing my opinion, is going to be more impactful than any type of personal shame that would come my way from making this video. So without any further ado, let's move into point number 1, which is that this is an overly broad restriction of my First Amendment rights. As an adult legal citizen who lives in the United States, the land of the free, I've always believed that it was my right to watch whatever kind of adult entertainment that I wanted. As Randy from South Park would say, I thought this was America. I thought I had the right to just watch weird stuff at home in my private time if I felt like it. And the First Amendment, for those of you that are unfamiliar, is usually our most important amendment. It establishes a right to free speech and a right to religion. Specifically for free speech, it says the government shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. Of course, this was challenged time and time again throughout our nation's history, and through successive state and Supreme Court cases, it has been expanded to include controversial opinions, even ones that are offensive and denigrating, criticisms of the government itself. You know, you can say horrible things about our government and it's not sedition, the right to publish and access various forms of media, protections against compelled speech. That's an interesting one that not many people talk about. You can't be forced to profess your belief in something or forced to give a speech or an association. And also, with some limitations that we're about to talk about, applies to my right to access adult materials. In the case of adult materials, there are two important legal exceptions here. First and foremost is that none of this material can be non-consensual, either involving minors or people that didn't know that they were being filmed. We can't post or enjoy content that objectively hurts other people. The second and more dubious one for this video is an exception for obscenity. When governments restrict access to adult movies or adult materials or offensive things, they usually cite obscenity laws. The government has made it very clear that they have the right to restrict obscene materials. This is one I disagree with and we'll return to in a moment. In the case of pornography, it is typically described as hardcore sexual conduct, but in the broader context of obscenity, the Supreme Court typically relies on the Miller test, as laid out by Chief Justice Warren Burger quite a long time ago. The 3 prongs of the Miller test are as follows. 1. Whether the average person applying contemporary community standards would find the work when taken as a whole, appeals to the prurient interest. 2, whether the work depicts or describes in a patently offensive way sexual conduct specifically defined by applicable state law. And number 3, whether the work taken as a whole lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. If you're of the opinion that this definition of obscenity seems a little bit vague or perhaps broad, you might not be surprised to find that a number of federal judges agree with you. In his 2002 opinion in Ashcroft versus American Civil Liberties Union, several justices expressed concern about the definition of obscenity, and Justice Stephen G. Breyer wrote in his concurring opinion that to read the statute as adopting the community standards of every locality in the United States would provide the most Puritan of communities with a heckler's veto affecting the rest of the nation. And I totally agree with that. I'm not particularly happy with the broadness by which my state has the ability to define obscenity or the nation as a whole. I believe we need much more specific tests than that, because anybody who finds something objectionable could find it obscene and thus criminalize free speech. That being said, for most of my life, I have never had to deal with any type of obscenity law ever, but now my state, through this new law, is effectively enforcing a heckler's veto. Now, to be very clear, the state isn't outright banning access or restricting it. However, the laws they've put in place definitely have a chilling effect on the businesses in the forms of large fines, lawsuits, and as what we'll get to in a little bit, a kind of unique situation that forces them to lose money to do business in the state of Texas. This really isn't surprising to me, given that the culture wars right now center very heavily on people's orientation. And in the Federalist Society's Project 2025, which is a blueprint for the next conservative president, there's a section, I believe it's on page 4, that makes it very clear that they wish to strip all First Amendment protections away from pornography and completely ban it nationwide, which we'll return to this in a moment. What I want to talk about next is perhaps for me even more concerning than the freedom of speech issue, and that's just how badly these laws violate your privacy. These laws don't just violate your First Amendment rights, they also violate your right to privacy. Every single state that rolled out adult entertainment restriction laws has insisted that this is not a ban on adult entertainment, and rather that the state just needs to verify that you're not a minor and to ensure that no crimes are being committed. This sounds pretty reasonable. We don't want minors to have unfettered access to this kind of information, and we're already clicking that little box verifying that we're 18 plus, so it seems kind of reasonable to allow the state to have a voluntary check on your identification. However, in the case of these laws, you have to show it to a third-party company because the state does not have the budget to maintain a type of software like this. This third-party company will verify your information, cross-reference it with the state's database, and say, yes, this person's over 18, and let you into the website. And like anything in government, the company that donates the most money to campaigns is the one that gets the contracts to create these systems. The company in question that we're going to be talking about today is called Invok. They make a variety of IT products, and they seem to be successful before getting into this market. I'm saying that just to emphasize that they are a real company, but their biggest hit was creating the LAID system. The LAID is not the Los Angeles identification system, but rather the Louisiana Digital Driver's License for the entire state. So Louisiana has it where you don't have to keep your driver's license in your, on you in your person. You can have it digitally. They were one of the very first companies to build a technological backbone for this type of verification work. Then when Louisiana rolled out a very similar adult website restriction law as Texas, Invok was there to say, hey, we already run LAID, we do your driver's licenses, can we do this too? And as it turns out, they were the only company that met the government requirements to verify IDs, and they sponsored a number of people behind the bill as well. And I should note that this service is not free to use. You have to pay for this, or at least somebody has to pay for it. And in this case, it's usually the adult distribution website itself. One such company online reported that only about 9% of its users that click onto the site ever complete the verification process. And every time somebody does, it costs the company, like one of these companies that shut down, $1.50 per user, which, if you know anything about online advertising rates, is really high. And as they pointed out in their interview, they pointed out that there's no guarantee that they'll even buy anything. About 1% of people buy stuff on adult websites. So 1% of 9% is what people are buying. And the profit margins, as you can see, are getting increasingly thin here, to the point where you might be losing money by allowing them onto your website. I suppose you could shift to user payments and make me pay to verify myself with the state, but then that's even more of an adult entertainment tax than it was before. And as such, Invok is making serious revenue off of these laws. They're not a giant company, they're not going to be a $10 billion valuation anytime soon. I don't hope not, but they're turning a steady and healthy profit. And it, again, should not be surprising that they appear to have a hand in writing the bills for states that want to roll out these type of restrictions, and seem to be legally entwined in politics. I don't want to imply that they're breaking the law, but because they're not, but they are lobbying. And I also want to give them credit where credit is due. Invok has made numerous public statements through either PR releases or through company leaders, stating that they are not collecting or retaining user information whatsoever. They also claim that they are not retaining information about what you watch. They didn't record it to begin with. Almost all of their public statements are very reassuring that they are pro-privacy, that they are not sharing, harvesting, or doing anything weird with your information. However, I believe that the very concept of ID verification is antithetical to personal privacy. You almost can't have one with the other. They're just oxymorons that do not go together at all. This is the point in the video where, unfortunately, I'm leaving factual basis and delving so far into opinion land that it is pure conjecture and conspiracy, so there's nothing better to symbolize that than the tinfoil hat. I might wear this in future episodes just to sort of signify when I'm leaving my comfort zone, but let's move on with the commentary. A lot of companies say that they aren't collecting your data, but they definitely are. And this is true of massive publicly traded companies that are required to have disclosures and compliance with the FTC, FCC, FBI, CIA, or just their own shareholders. This is even doubly true of smaller privately held companies that don't have to do any of this kind of reporting. So I cannot legally or factually say that Invok is going to be recording your private data or saving it or sharing it with somebody. As a matter of fact, their public statements again indicate the opposite. But I do know that many others in this industry are. Even assuming the absolute best of intentions of these types of companies, they're still subject to being hacked, internally leaked, subpoenaed, or other forms of data breaches. For example, could you name 3 companies that had massive data breaches this year? Probably not, and that's not because they don't happen, but it's most likely because there have been about 300 major data breaches this year alone. Literally almost one per day showing up in the news if you follow tech news. So most of us are desensitized to it. Honestly, I get letters in the mail all the time. Hey, class action lawsuit. Hey, your data's been breached. Hey, you're owed $12 because, my bank or something leaked my data. I just chunk those. I get so many of them. And again, this is from big companies. This is from international banks. This happens at Google. This happens at Facebook. We're not talking about small companies like Invok, which are even more vulnerable. And what about states' attorneys generals? They're going to be sort of overseeing and directing these programs. And you have to ask yourself, 1, can you name your state attorney general? And 2, if you can you trust them? This is becoming an increasingly partisan role in most states. For example, we'll pick on Texas's Ken Paxton a little bit. He's been involved in a decades-long criminal real estate lawsuit for a loss of money that was so big he was facing a lifetime penalty in jail. He got impeached by the Texas Senate over this. He didn't get removed from office. There is a lawsuit from the SEC over securities frauds, dealing with whistleblowers saying he uses government funds for his own expenses. Recently, as the head, literally the lead prosecutor in the state, thought it was a good idea to dodge a process server that showed up at his house. He recently asked the Texas Department of Public Safety for a list of every single person that changed their genders. He sent subpoenas to both Georgia and Oregon hospitals for a list of all youth that have received trans treatment, or I believe it's called gender affirming care. And that's not creepy. That's totally normal, right? It's totally normal for your lead prosecutor, literally the face of law in your state, to be embroiled in a state, federal, and civil disputes with various people while trying to get lists of Texans that might be LGBTQ. That's about as far into the partisan politics as I care to go. I'm going to take the tinfoil hat off because it's literally making me sweat under the studio lights. So even if you love Ken Paxton, even if you think he's an alpha Chad and I've been really unfair to him or to other people, and that I just sort of don't see the truth because of my personal biases, imagine this. Imagine you empower this champion to fight for you on behalf and know what all sorts of adult films everybody in the state is watching. That's great. You love it. It goes great. What happens in 12 years when that position flops? When somebody from a different party, a different ideology, maybe a total hack, maybe somebody that's compromised, who is going to be empowered next to make these kind of decisions, which is why I believe that legal precedence is super important. Therefore, I believe that even with the best of intentions on behalf of the company, on behalf of the state, and on behalf of the legislators and prosecutors running it, this legal requirement for age verification creates numerous opportunities for massive data breaches. And it shouldn't be this way. We should be a much more accepting society. But if a list of all the adult films that various people across the state ever leaked, it could potentially ruin lives. Like you could lose your job, you could lose your family, all sorts of very unpleasant stuff could happen. And if you think that's an exaggeration, that nobody's that judgy, we actually don't have to go very far back into history to see exactly this happening, but worse. For example, have you heard about the gay club raids in the 1960s? The gay club raids are a near perfect example of how these kinds of laws can be used to intimidate people or cause harm to broad swaths of society. In case you didn't know, homosexuality was considered a mental disorder in most places in the United States up until the 1970s, and not a mild one at that. It was classified as a damaging, dangerous mental disorder that required inpatient treatment, and those treatments could include electroshock therapy, among other unpleasant things. On top of this, homosexuality was broadly criminalized, i.e., it was illegal to be gay in any capacity. As an example of this, when the Allies liberated the concentration camps at the end of World War II, they freed the Jews, freed the Gypsies, freed the political prisoners and Russians, but the people that were imprisoned by the Nazis for being homosexual, they had little pink stars on them, they were required to finish their prison sentences in the concentration camps, and they just swapped guards. We swapped Allies for Nazi guards, and the Allies made them finish their sentences. It was absolutely barbaric. And you're saying, okay, well, that's an extreme thing, and that's in Germany. But literally, up until the 70s, you could be forced into prison, fined, pick up a felony, chemically castrated, or forced into involuntary psychiatric treatment where they would run a bunch of experimental therapies on you, like electroshock therapy, all for the crime of being gay, or being accused of being gay, or involuntarily being outed. So we're going to pull back from that and go back to our example of the club raids. Therefore, gay bars and clubs and places that homosexuals would primarily hang out were areas that were often barely tolerated by most big cities. They pretty much didn't exist in small towns. If you were in New Orleans or Los Angeles or something, there might be one or two little clubs. And they were only allowed to exist in the most crime-ridden or decrepit parts of town. So police, when they wanted some easy arrests, they would frequently raid these bars and arrest every single person inside of them. All of the people that were arrested were charged with various sodomy laws, many of these not repealed up until 2018, 2019. The police would then take pictures of the accused, share them with local newspapers with names, addresses, and everything. So anybody at the gay bar was subject to arrest, forced outing, social ostracization, imprisonment, and in some cases, castration. And I want to make it really clear that this was 100% legal in the era of color TV and moon landings, okay? We were like past the era of moon landings. Like landing on the moon was commonplace when we were still doing this. And what doubly sucks for a lot of people, this didn't just affect the LGBT community, it affected straight people too. because these bars were in the bad part of town. That might be the town's only pornographic movie theaters, only adult toy stores. That might be where you would find the only pharmacy that would sell you condoms in some of those eras, in case you didn't want another kid, even with your married partner at home. So a great number of straight men were arrested and rounded up because they were walking to or from, just like past this business at a very unfortunate time. As outrageous as that is, you could be walking past the gay club to go to the only store in town to buy condoms because you've already got 7 kids. And because you were there at a bad time, you get rounded up, your face is in the paper, you're in prison, and it'll result in their lives being destroyed. It's instant divorce, lose your job, banned from church, run out of town, and that's if people just don't straight up kill you. And again, this is very recent. There are people still alive that have experienced this. There's footage of this. As I record it, I'm trying to Google all the different clips and recordings and news releases and stuff like that. And these laws in the United States would mostly get repealed in 1986. I think there was a Supreme Court case based out of Texas, and some of them even persisted up until close to the 2020s. So this was disastrous. And one fun thing you should read about historically, I'm not going to cover too deeply, is in 1969, there was a riot at the Stonewall Inn in New York, an infamous gay club. In 1969, the police wanted to raid these clubs just like I have previously described, but this time the customers fought back, and it ended in a nearly day-long riot/melee between LGBT members, drag queens, and police. The details are very, very fuzzy, and this was before the era of cell phones. What eventually happened is the police did win. A ton of people got arrested, but the community came out to defend them, and this was sort of a national embarrassment. And this is sort of the straw that broke the camel's back and caused these laws to be changed. So you would ask, hey Drift, why did we do this little historical detail? Why are you going to get on your soapbox and preach to us? Well, it's because I believe the laws of the past were specifically designed to intimidate and criminalize the gay community. And I don't believe that the new anti-porn laws are very different in their ultimate goals, even if they may not say so on paper. I believe, this is not a fact, this is my belief, I believe that they are designed to intimidate various groups of people into changing their behavior. And I want to clarify, this isn't just the gay community, this isn't just the trans community, because that's like a whole big thing these days. This includes straight people, this includes non-monogamous couples, people with kinks, the non-religious, almost anything. And if you knew that a company was collecting your personal identification, and there was even a chance that they were keeping tabs on everything that you watched, and you lived in a deeply conservative community, and I don't mean that in the form of American conservatism. For example, Dearborn, Michigan is like 90-something% Muslim. They're very conservative. You can be non-religious conservative. You can just be in any sort of community that holds a strict set of values that you have to live up to, and when you deviate from that, you can be punished. I mean it in the very broad sense of the word. Then at any given time, you could be outed, you could be forced to suffer drastic legal or social consequences. It could blow up your whole life. It could be so much as somebody steals your ID and they get on the website and watch some wacky adult films and you get punished for it. And I've also always believed that surveillance is a form of intimidation in and of itself. People change their behavior and become fearful when they know that they're being watched. This is true when an abusive spouse does it. This is true when your mom's peeking over your shoulder when you're on the computer, and it's true when the government does it. We all change our behavior when we know people are watching because we fear the consequences. We'll take a little breather to give a shout out to our sponsor today, Gamer Advantage Glasses. I reached out to them and they agreed to sponsor this video. They manufacture the black glasses that you see me wearing in almost all of my videos. I've done a number of testing of their products here on this channel. Essentially, they're blue light filtering glasses that are lightweight, extremely durable, surprisingly low cost for their quality and durability. They're originally for gaming. I would love to make an inappropriate joke here about wearing glasses while you have your private time so you don't go blind, but I don't think the brand would appreciate that. They were cool enough to support me on this video because there's realistically no way it's going to monetize. If you're looking for a nice pair of gaming glasses, if you're on the computer all the time, or if you're looking for a pair of glasses that are outrageously durable for how lightweight they are, I'm this not supposed to say this, they feel like cheap plastic, okay? They're like really, I can't make it focus. They're like really lightweight. You would think they would be cheap. I ran over these things with my car and they're still fine. It's very, very impressive. Shout out to Gamer Advantage. Thank you for supporting me, and thank you for being cool with this type of video topic. If you'd like a pair yourself, you can click the link down there in the description. I think my code is 10% off, and oh, these come in prescription. You can get them in prescription lenses too. Towards the back end of the video, I wanted to go over some counterpoints and talk about pornography addiction, because some of the people that want to restrict access to this type of material are doing so with good intentions, because they believe that it is inherently harmful to minors, or in some cases to anybody. This isn't a belief that I entirely share, but I would be an absolute fool not to mention some of the harmful aspects of repeated exposure to adult films. First and foremost, I agree that minors do not need unfettered access to adult materials. I don't think this one requires a lot of explanation. You know, kindergartners shouldn't be renting stuff from the adult video store. Also, I think that exposure to adult films at very young ages can give children unhealthy perspectives on reality, and it's especially bad if repeated exposure causes them to misunderstand how relationship dynamics should be, and in some cases can cause them to grow up with very unrealistic and unhealthy expectations of sex or your sexual partners. Pornography addiction is a very real thing that men do struggle with. I am not going to be covering that in depth in this particular video because my main point was the freedom of speech restrictions, but some people do very much so get addicted to porn. Excessive pornography has deleterious effects on the psychology of young men, and everything that I'm about to say is doubly true of younger men, teenagers, 18, 19, 20, when you're in college and you're really finding yourself. So adult materials, just like alcohol, just like cannabis, gambling, overeating, or even caffeine, pornography can be addictive to some people. This could be due to a genetic predisposition. There could be perhaps an underlying sexual or hyperarousal disorder. Could be just from a bad environment, or just like scrolling on TikTok infinitely and rotting your brain, you could just get stuck in a dopamine loop of adult materials. It's a very unhealthy thing. If TikTok can ruin your brain and just by scrolling, the same thing is true of Pornhub. Next up, I'm going to describe some of the common signs of porn addiction. And guys, if any of this describes you, I strongly recommend you go see a licensed therapist and get help for your problems before this destroys your life. It can be very, very bad, just like a gambling addiction. So the most commonly reported side effect is that your sex life becomes less satisfying. You just find less entertainment in your partner, and you want more and more of just that really intense dopamine pumping adult materials that you see online. You don't want real women. Adult entertainment ultimately ends up taking the place of other relationships in your life. If you don't seek a girlfriend or a wife or a partner or boyfriend or whatever, whoever's watching, because you're too deep into watching videos online, that's an extremely unhealthy thing. The people that fall into this trap are often associated with risk-seeking behavior, like watching adult films at work. There are a ton of people every year that get fired, that lose good, high-earning jobs because they cannot keep their adult film time at home, because they have to rub one out at work, because they just have to carry it with them because of a lot of reasons. But ultimately, it is a very foolish risk-seeking behavior that you do because you are addicted to the media. They might spend a lot of money on OnlyFans, and while we would laugh at them and call them simps, that can just destroy people's finances. In more severe cases, you can suffer from erectile dysfunction, or erectile dysfunction aside from whatever increasingly extreme adult materials you are watching. There are some people that watch so much stuff that normal interactions with normal human beings no longer do it for them, and they have to watch the adult films online. Some people have to put that on while they're doing other things. And when this happens, typically you're at the point where you're going deeper and deeper and deeper into these kinks and fetishes and various materials, often requiring harder and harder stuff. And that's never good for the psyche. And this is coming from a guy who has watched a very wide variety of genres of adult entertainment in my years. If you get obsessed with this, if you let it get in your head and you just dive into the bottom, you'll find that the bottom is a very unpleasant place, and that's not a pun. I'm not going to judge you if you're into really kinky stuff or BDSM. To be quite honest with you all, that is common to the point where these days it's almost about to get pushed into the vanilla spectrum of things. But the concern is that if you always need something more to get going, if you need something harder than the last video you watched, something, a bigger high, so to speak, the old kinks no longer do it for you, that'll lead you down a very dark path. Not only will it destroy any chance of interpersonal relationships or satisfaction that you might have, But for many men, this ends up in the section of adult films I hate the most, called the violence against women kink zone. I'm going to keep that one really vague. I think a lot of you young men are watching know exactly what I'm talking about. This is really dangerous for women because it teaches men, which would be their partners, that women like or should be subjected to things that are honestly rare or extreme. For the men involved, they often have serious feelings of guilt or shame that are hard to deal with and often get projected out in different ways. They manifest in various maladaptive behaviors. And if you're experiencing any of this stuff, I strongly recommend that you see a therapist, a whole licensed, board certified therapist that you have to pay money to go see, because these are destructive habits. My caveat here is that we don't usually ban those other things I mentioned earlier, like alcohol, cannabis, gambling, video games, overeating, things like that. We don't typically put legal regulations on those. In some cases, alcohol is regulated. In some cases, gambling is a little hit or miss. But typically, we don't restrict something just because some people can't handle it. For example, alcohol is literally poison to your body. As much as you love being drunk and it's cool to drink it, it's basically poison if you go ask any doctor. And it's responsible for probably about half of all of the health problems in the entire world. An outrageous billions of people over history, a number of unnecessary deaths, liver failures, diabetes, malnutrition, beriberi, which I had to deal with. Tons of awful, nasty, destructive stuff is associated with alcohol, but we don't ban it because it only affects addicts. Certain people are addicted to different things, and we have some tolerance for that in society, and we don't just outright ban things because they're unhealthy or because some people can't handle it. If that were the case, we would probably have banned social media. Well, that's in works. There'd be no TV, there'd be no gambling, there'd be no video games, there'd be no sugar, there'd be no unhealthy food, there'd be no really any of the fun stuff in life. So while I'm very clear with you that if you dive deep into adult films, it can be bad for your psyche, it still provides value to other people. And I believe the more appropriate way to deal with any sort of societal problems that come from adult films is with education and therapy rather than just outright restricting access. As promised, my wife JWO Designs has returned for some history fun facts and a discussion about pornography and how it affects relationship dynamics.
Hello, it is me. If it's not obvious by now, I am also a regular enjoyer of fine adult entertainment. Now, that was pretty sinful.
We're both of the opinion that pornography is normal. It can be healthy when used appropriately, healthy in a relationship as well, and has thousands of years of history. For example, the Venus of Hofels is considered to be a pornographic idol of a fertility goddess that's about 35,000 years old. You see it in Babylonian history, and
Greeks were also pretty wild. Romans had extremely explicit bathhouses with very explicit activities that occurred in those bathhouses, not just for bathing, guys. The Japanese had shunga, or erotic art, from all the way back in the 1600s.
The Kama Sutra itself is extremely old, I think just under 1,000 years old if I'm not mistaken. We've had these things in our society for a very long time, and that society didn't fall apart. As an example of how prevalent pornography can be, a study shows that 97% of men have watched some form of adult entertainment in their lives. 82% are still regular watchers, and this includes very old men. And my personal favorite, I think I shared this with you when it came out. There was a college study where some psychologists wanted to measure the impact of adult materials on college students' dating lives. And what did they find?
They honestly could not find a college student that had not watched porn. I mean, it's just such a common thing.
Yeah, there was no control group to compare to. All of this is to say that adult entertainment has been ubiquitous throughout human history and is still present in modern society. I am an enjoyer of fine Japanese cartoons on occasion.
Oh, well, me too.
Yeah.
And, I mean, so far, it has not caused any issues in our relationship. I mean, like, maybe some minor ones. You want to go into detail?
No, you can go ahead and put me on the spot. I'll take it.
I mean, sometimes, like, it's little minor stuff. Like, let's just say he's wanked, and then I want to have sex and the timing's off. Just little stuff like that, but we'll wait a few hours and just go back to it.
I'm not the only one who's guilty of that, by the way.
I know. It's like,
just
yes,
make this real clear.
It just more happens with him.
Okay.
Just kidding.
But we don't really keep secrets from each other. We don't keep secrets about what we're watching online. Though I will admit it's not a normal topic of conversation. Most of our adult entertainment viewing is something that we do in private, independent of each other. But every now and then, we put something up on the big TV and check stuff out together.
I mean, this helps us get into the mood when we want to have sex. And also, a lot of other couples do use this as a method to get started, foreplay on their sex. Also, maybe try to learn a new thing.
Lots of new techniques.
Sometimes you're just bored and you just really want to find weird kind of porn. And honestly, you just can't not look at it. You're just kind of like, okay, what is this? And you're like, oh, that's what that is. I'm not going to name any examples. We're not kink shaming here.
Yeah, we're a very sex positive household. We try to be. But you can't tell me you haven't seen a video and just be like, I already know this like isn't my thing, but I got to know where this train goes. There's just something fascinating about it.
I mean, honestly, in some ways, I believe us sharing what we watch in porn has brought us closer together in our relationship.
I would agree, because we have a better understanding of each other's respective preferences in bed, and it's a very ancient, like pre-boomer, like silent generation saying, but if there's rocks in a marriage, the rocks are probably in the bed, you know? Yes. And sometimes it's just kind of for fun, you know? But, so yeah, our normal lives got pretty screwed up by this change in law. I just got surprised one day. I think there was one morning you had some private time and found an equally unpleasant surprise for you with a banned website. And I'm of the opinion, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that what I do in my house with my lawfully wedded wife in my private time should not be subject to oversight from the state of Texas. I'm not particularly impressed by this, and I actually have written in the little outline, the little script in front of me, that this is our final straw, that we're moving out of Texas. It's not a... Probably, I was just mad when I wrote that.
I mean, it's pretty frustrating to have to deal with. I mean, there's other things that we could do, but you want to do this in a non-complicated manner, and they're making it complicated.
Yes. So we've considered moving out of the state to somewhere that I can at least watch my adult films in peace without the state attorney general peeking over my shoulder to make sure that I don't know what they're even looking for there, to be honest with you.
You're like, hey man, what you watching?
Yeah. Oh, you're at the good stuff.
Oh, you degenerate.
All right, guys, that is all for this extremely long video. It was just something that was very important, not only to me, but I think to both of us and to a lot of people in the state. And weirdly, I didn't see a lot of people on YouTube talking about this or making content about it or having an opinion. So it felt wrong to not use a huge platform to affect what I would believe positive change. I mean, it's a pretty weird topic. Like how often, this would be the second, no, this would be the third. We made porn once. Remember the old drag thing? If you were here right now, you just couldn't keep your hands off of me. People loved that.
I mean, it's not technically, I guess some people would consider that porn.
PG-13. Okay, it was lewd, right? No, lewd has a different meaning. We did the old joke. So this would be your third time coming back on the channel to discuss adult films.
Yes. But, you know, it's not far off, so it's fine.
They're going to see you at a con in the Ari costume and be like, I'm going to ask her about my really weird kink.
Don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.